But right now it's time for football at 4. Johnny Mac's in the house. We got a lot of football to dive into. Super Bowl's on the way. Free agency stuff starting to come out. We know the Eagles still don't have anything, John, and I guess we'll start with the Eagles stuff there. We had Mike Garafolo on earlier, and he had mentioned that he was at the Senior Bowl, and he had heard from Tom Pelissero. They were standing next to each other. He was going to come on the air and report the name for us, but he said another name has reportedly turned down the Eagles' job. So it hasn't come out yet, but that news should be coming out shortly. So expect an uproar from the fans.
Well, yeah, I expect that every day, no matter what happens. But I will continue to take issue with the term "turn down." Now, I don't know what Tom is referring to. I
said it's not a big name. He wanted to shore it up, but another person has either declined an interview or turned down the job. So somewhere in there, he actually took the phone from Mike for a moment, got on the phone, and then decided that he wanted to firm up some more info.
Well, I heard there's a name coming out that they requested permission on and did not get permission. So maybe that's a different name. And we'll see who that turns out to be. But again, it's not turning down the job. And I don't think James Urban turned down the job. I know Graham Harrell didn't turn down the job.
Yeah.
So
why do you think James Urban?
It's a semantics issue.
Why do you think a guy like James Urban wouldn't be interested?
You think about the position he's in, and
quarterback coach with the Ravens,
quarterback coach in Baltimore, which is a very good team, despite the obviously disappointing divisional round playoff loss. But in the regular season, that was the best team in football. They project to be very, very good moving forward with Lamar Jackson is going to be the MVP of this league, and he's the position coach of the MVP of this league. So, I can only speculate, but my assumption is, in that case, it's probably he's looking at the position and saying, well, I don't get to call plays. At the bare minimum, if I wait around for another year, I could get a position where I call the plays. And who knows? You've seen quarterback coaches jump up to head coaching positions in the past. So I just think, much like the reason John DeFilippo originally left here, there's a clearer path. If you're an assistant coach in this league that has head coaching aspirations, and as I said, most people want to become coordinators to say the least. You're thinking about pass. What's the quickest pass? What is the easiest pass? It's not to say you can't do it in different ways, but there are clearly easier paths. And I think that's what people who think they have other options will look at. If you don't think you have other options, you're not going to be concerned with stuff like that.
What about, okay, so I don't know this, in Jacksonville, they are going to hire Jay Gruden as their next offensive coordinator, which I was kind of surprised that Jay would go to, Jacksonville, which is not a high-profile spot. They don't have a lot of success. The coach, who's the Syracuse guy?
Doug Marrone.
Doug Marrone, does he call the plays there?
No, Jay will call the plays. Jay's a little bit different. I think it's legitimate to point out guys like that, guys like Jay Gruden, was a head coach for years, offensive coordinator before that, very good at calling plays, very well regarded, very highly respected. Yeah, those guys, they're not going to interview for the job. They don't want that type of job. He's on a different level than the James Urbans of the world or the Graham Harrells of the world. I mean, that's a completely different conversation. And I don't think the Eagles were ever involved because they know a guy like that is not going to take a offensive coordinator job where the head coach is an offensive guy that calls plays. So there are different categories, and Jay's in a category that the Eagles know they can't be involved in.
Isn't it a sign of a strong organization when you're promoting from within consistently? And I understand you always want to interview external and you always want to get the best potential candidate possible, but it just feels like at this point we are really grasping for straws. And it's like you have guys right there. Are they not ready? And if they're not ready, why?
Yeah, it is a good sign, and that's why Doug did it. And that's why he wanted to go about that way. And that's how he wanted to go about it. And that's how he wanted his coaching staff to be. And Jeffrey Lurie ruined that. Simple answer. I don't care if people want to accept that or not. I know a lot of people don't. If Doug had his way, Mike Rowe would still be here. It's as simple as that.
Seems like a situation that the front office maybe overplayed their hand on how valuable they felt their own organization's opening would be.
Yeah, they made a mistake. And I don't know what other way to describe it, because now you're on to plan C or plan D. And again, they'll spin it a different way when they finally hire the coach, the offensive coordinator that they do hire. They'll pretend this was the guy we always wanted. We just wanted to look around. You know how this works. But it isn't. And they did think they could get certain guys that they haven't been able to get, and now you sort of make the best of what is left and the best of what you can put together from this point forward. And as I wrote, to be fair, I mean, I don't think, and I said on the show yesterday, and it's on 973ESPN.com today, I don't think it's that big of a deal, because the offense isn't changing. It's Doug's offense. And I explained it pretty clearly on the website. What you're talking about is a filter.
Yeah. Well, some teams, John, go without a coordinator. They just say, all right, we're not going to have one. Is that the road that this team goes down? Doug's just the coordinator, the head coach, or does he give someone that's here that title, and that's just the way it goes? And it's all much ado about nada.
I think he'll give somebody the title, and it's much ado about nada. I'm not. Look, it's important. I'm not going to say that, but it's not as important as it typically would be if the offensive coordinator called plays. Right. So it's going to be very similar to Mike Rowe.
Let me ask you this real fast. I'm sorry to cut in, but do you have a problem with, should people have a problem with Doug calling plays? Is it quite okay that Doug calls the plays, and that can it just be that Doug calls the plays, he's good at it, they don't need a coordinator?
Yeah, I think it could be. I think a lot of that, and I talked about this either last week or earlier this week, I forget. A lot of it is just, how the NFL sets up things and what they require teams to do. The coordinators have to speak once a week. So if you put that title on somebody, you clean that up pretty quickly. Whereas if you don't, you have to sort of negotiate, okay, who's in charge, who's doing what, and it becomes a little bit murkier. So it could be as simple as using that title as a logistical tool to solve some problems that people don't think about and have nothing to do with football. It could be something as simple as that. But he is a play caller, and that's why I don't understand all the hand wringing. I don't understand all the pearl clutching. The play caller's already here. And if you look at the Eagles last year, I think they were 12th in points scored. What Doug stresses is situational football. He stressed that since the day he got here. They were 4th in red zone. They were 3rd on 3rd downs. And think about all the injuries, all the attrition, all the personnel issues, and making wrong decisions, and all the practice squad guys. And they were 3rd in the league at what they try to be good at, and 4th in the league at what they try to be good at. And even points, 12th in the league, which is in the top half, and people act like this is the worst defense in history. I've been on record numerous times. This was a better coaching job than when they won the Super Bowl. It is not a vacuum. He didn't have anything at his disposal. And that's what he put together offensively. And you fire the offensive coordinator that he's comfortable with. The questions here should be, directed at Jeffrey Lurie if anybody could get to him. And we will at the league meetings. That's the next chance he'll talk if history serves. This was a bad decision. And now they're stuck trying to get a guy that Doug doesn't know to placate, as I said, the fan base, to placate the owner. It's the way the Cleveland Browns do business, not the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I'm just shocked at this. And I know we've talked about it a lot, but it's just, you're right. If that's the official word of Jeffrey Lurie stepped in, and I'm not saying I don't believe you. I 100% believe you, John, but it's just crazy to think to me because he's a guy from where I'm sitting my whole life that he just always did things the right way. He let people in his organization make the decisions. He was comfortable. He would never erratically, irresponsibly jump the gun on a decision like this.
Intervene with this, though, Rye and John. They were 9-7 the last 2 years and went on some crazy runs and had some wild things happen to get them there. And there's a lot of times we have the conversation, well, do them getting into the playoffs cloud their judgment and make them think, well, maybe Jeffrey Lurie's saying, no, I'm realizing we're 9-7 even though we've made the playoffs.
Yeah, no, that could be it.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think you look at it, I think each case is its own, and I think you look at it different. I think they looked at last season, not this season past, but 2018. And, they overvalued what they had from a personnel standpoint, certainly. And they thought they were closer, and that late season run was a bit of fool's gold. And on the field, you can argue the same thing happened this year. But I think the decision was completely opposite this year in the fact that Jeffrey Lurie took in the weight of those expectations over the spring and summer when everybody was proclaiming this team to be a significant Super Bowl contender and using that as sort of the grading scale. And it should have been the exact opposite. I was one of those people that said, on paper, this team looks like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. But about 7 weeks in, maybe even before that, I recalibrated. I said, no, I was wrong. This team is not. This team is not close to being a Super Bowl contender. That's where I think Jeffrey Lurie made his mistake. He's judging things on this team should have been great instead of judging it on, oh, my God, they're third in third downs, they're fourth in red zone, they're 12th in points scored with Boston Scott and Greg Ward and Josh Perkins. That's where I think the disconnect comes from. He's in a vacuum. He's saying we won the Super Bowl. We should have won the Super Bowl again, instead of taking it out of the vacuum and saying this team overachieved in a big way down the stretch, and actually over the large sample size of an entire season.
Well, maybe his focus was before that stretch run, right? Maybe his focus was.
He made the decision at 5-7.
Right.
He made the decision at 5-7 when they lost to Miami. I remember being on the show.
And that Miami loss really jostled a lot of people's perception
of
this team.
I heard people calling it the worst loss in franchise history, which I laughed at the time. Evidently, people in the organization believed it just like some of the fans. They thought that loss was a catastrophe of epic proportions. And I just don't agree with that. I think it was a terrible loss. I think it was an illogical loss. I think it was terrible. I think it was everything you can think of. But I don't think you look at one loss and say, okay, we got to blow this thing up offensively, especially when the final 4 weeks. And I'm the one who told you guys, hey, that was against terrible competition. So I understand that. But still, you're doing it. You're doing it. You don't have Tyreek Hill. You don't have dynamic playmakers. You're doing it with Greg Ward, who everybody thinks is Tyreek Hill now. Why? And I'm joking. I know people really don't, so I know I'll get tweets about that. But they do think he's a significant player in the NFL now. Why? Because Doug Peterson and Mike Groh made you believe that. Eagles know they have to get better. Eagles know Greg Ward isn't going to be a starting receiver. A lot of the fans don't know that because of how well they schemed for him.
Hey, look, John, after that game when they lost to the Dolphins, and I was like, I don't care that they lost to the Dolphins. You could be mad right now. It's a bad loss, but you can't change the whole perception of the organization, and it sounds as if that's what the organization did. They took that loss and said, we're down here, not up there. And I don't know. I mean, I guess the fact that they beat the Giants and Redskins and the Cowboys didn't do much to change their perception either, which probably shouldn't anyway.
No, long term, as I said, personnel-wise, it shouldn't have changed their decision-making. I don't think it has, and I think that's the good part of it. But from a coaching standpoint, I think it did. And again, while I say all this, I'm going to be honest. I don't think it matters that much. I don't think because, again, the play caller's here, the guys running the offense here. The offense is the same. It's going to be the same offense as it was when Frank was here. It's going to be the same offense as when Mike was here, whoever the new offensive coordinator is. So long term, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But I do think it's a weird hill to stand on.
I will say that
you didn't need to stand on.
And Garofalo had said that he's at the Senior Bowl, I guess it is, and he said, look, there are people, coordinators and wide receiver coaches coming up to me left and right that want to be interviewed for this job. So it's not that people don't want this job, but he thought that the wide receiver job was one that a lot of very good coaches have interest in. So maybe if they're just kind of waiting around just to see what's going on at the Senior Bowl at the end of this week, they put everything together and come up with something, and the next week we have a completely different conversation.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I've told you guys that's what the Senior Bowl is. It's sort of like a big convention for coaches, and that's when everything will kind of clear itself up. Yeah, I mean, there's only 32 of those jobs. There's a lot of people that will take any job on the position coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. So anybody saying they're not going to be able to get people, no, that's wrong. Clearly, they targeted some people they wanted that they were unable to get. That's all we're trying to say. Yep. And anything trying to change that now is just, they're trying to direct you away from the fact they weren't able to get who they wanted originally. It doesn't mean you can't get good coaches, and certainly positionally. Yeah, I mean, you'll be able to get very good coaches if you make proper decisions. And when it comes to positional coaches, it's about teaching. It's not about game planning. It's about making sure your positional players have the right technique, and it's essentially a classroom. That's what it is from a positional coach standpoint.
All right, John, real quick. I don't know how early we look at the reports like this, but reports that the Eagles are going to pursue the top cornerbacks in free agency. One, Chris Harris, the other, Byron Jones. Do you put a lot of stock into it at this stage of the game? At January 22nd, we're looking at top free agents already, or does that show how desperate the Eagles want to upgrade that position?
Well, they certainly want to upgrade the position. That comes from the Senior Bowl as well.
Yes.
I'm sure. I think it was Tony Pauline. Sure he talked.
Yes, at the Senior Bowl. He's one of them college draft guys.
Yeah, I'm sure he talked to a scout. He said, we want to improve cornerback position. And then you look at who's the top cornerbacks, and that's sort of how that stuff manifests itself. Is it important on January 22nd? No, not really. Just from the fact it's logical to say Jalen Mills is a free agent, Ronald Darby's a free agent, and by the way, they need to improve and get better, even if they weren't free agents. So everybody knows the Eagles want corners. So how do you go about it? Is it free agency? Do you want to spend the kind of money to get top-tier corners in free agency? Do you want to go about it in the draft? But certainly they want to improve at that position.
All right, Johnny Mac back for another Football at 4. It goes fast, man. I had 8 other bullet points on my list to hit on today that I'm going to have to get to tomorrow, right? No, I mean, I'll tell you what, and we talk about it all the time, there's so much going on. We haven't really even dove into this game, but there's a lot of, Brady, Breeze, Rivers, Dak. What's going to happen with those guys? I think that's all interesting conversations that we'll have to get on maybe tomorrow's show. Johnny Mac, Football at 4. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thank you, guys.
And Johnny Mac, like all guests, appeared to be the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.